Sandy.
Hi, it's Dave.
Hi, it's Kirk.
Welcome to the A.D.K rock and metal channel, and today we are doing discussions, and our discussion topic will be created by the discussion generator. I tried.
Oh, you can do it. You're
discussion generator.
I'm not good either.
So yeah, we've got a whole load of new discussion topics in here, so we're gonna just kick straight in and let's go for it.
A different reference. Groove metal.
Oh, we got a gap. We had a gap. Okay, so is the rock metal genre subconsciously racist?
Interesting question.
I don't know where to start on this one and who should start it. Anyone got any specific thoughts on this one?
Well, look at the origins of heavy metal.
Of course, Kirk has.
It is white working class Europeans, isn't it? Specifically
Right.
Britain and Germany. You know, if we're talking about the first ever heavy metal band, I think we all agree is Black Sabbath, isn't it? And then you get the new wave of British heavy metal, thrash metal. You know, moves over to America. In Europe, we were talking about Halloween and the heavy metal scene. So predominantly a white musical genre. So does that make it subconsciously racist? First of all, you need to define subconsciously racist. Is that unintentionally using stereotypes to inform the way that you look at the world and certain groups of people? So you could do it with no malicious heart and be guilty, couldn't you, of racism as defined by the cultural Marxist critical race theory that's doing the rounds in universities these days? The answer, we do have some examples that are very contentious of racists within metal, and we've touched upon this. So we're talking about Burzum, clearly.
But these would be consciously, they would be consciously
so
racist.
Subconsciously,
So these are where...
I would say, do you know I'm tempted to say no, because as someone who grew up in the 90s where rock music was a fringe culture and it was like being part of a group and you all stuck together, it made you tolerant, because often some of you were bullied for your taste in music and the way you dressed. So I would say, if anything, this is a genre that always roots for the underdog, and I've not seen evidence of subconscious racism in there. I can't think of an example where someone's been to a metal gig and seen, you know, a black teenager thrashing away at the front and thought, what are you doing here? So in my experience, this is just my experience, no, it's not subconsciously racist. If anything, our culture is probably the most tolerant in music. It is a safe space.
So we're tolerant. Are we inclusive?
I don't think we go out of our way to be exclusionary.
Okay.
I really don't.
Yes, we don't go out of the way, but...
Because like you said, the question is subconsciously. We know that there are some conscious...
I specifically have put it as subconsciously because... Well, let Andy weigh in at this point with his thoughts.
I mean, I think Kirk described the sort of demographic of your typical metal band and metal fan. So you know, I would say no. The scene, the genres aren't subconsciously racist. I mean, some bands and some scenes, particularly like American hardcore, for example, go out of their way to be anti-racist, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, I've heard stories of people stopping gigs. You know, bands sort of stopping gigs and say, fucking sort yourselves out, otherwise we'll come down there, kind of thing. You know, Biohazard and, you know, bands like that. So, and you know, they've got the message where they're clearly anti-racist, and as you say, inclusive and all welcoming and embracing everyone to be part of the same part of the same scene. So, I don't think rock and metal is subconsciously racist, but then it's not very well populated by people who would be receptive of racism, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, it's
predominantly
you don't. That's the phrase. You don't see.
Which, if you went to Bangladesh and had Bangladeshi metal, it's not probably predominantly white though.
Yeah.
So they do have within their own cultures. And if you go to somewhere like I know that there is a huge African grindcore and metal scene over there.
And Indonesia, especially.
And Indonesia.
Yeah.
But they never break out of their country, so they're not accepted as much in the wider scheme of things. Now, I don't know if that's... But one of the things I noticed with the Indonesian scene is it's all about 4 or 5 years behind whatever's going on in the Western world. That's not me saying that they're copying or anything like that. It just seems to generally mean that they feel like whatever they're putting out does feel like it's something that's come out in the Western world several years before. It then eventually makes it over to there. They listen to it, and then you obviously you take on what you listen to. You adopt that. People kind of, you're influenced by your heroes, and that's why I think these scenes do appear later on. But the reason this got me thinking about it was we did a video on the band Seven Dust a few weeks back, and I was like, great singer. And if you were then to go, okay, so black singers of metal bands, name them, pick out the bands, and you're like, okay, God forbid,
Derek
Seven Dust, Derek Sepultura.
Suffocation. Is he the,
Okay, Suffocation. We got to 4.
Is he
He's the guitar player.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got 4.
Guy from Hyrax. What was it back in the day? Can't think of his name.
Look at that.
Kate and somebody.
Yeah.
Okay, we're up to 5. This is not a great sign.
Obviously, you've got the legends of hardcore Bad Brains.
Okay.
But yeah,
okay, bass player from POD.
We're not talking about
But now we are literally, when you're struggling to get up to 10. But even if like you're just all musicians, we'd struggle to find 10. And now, I don't think that's a case of intentionally or people going, oh, this is not the scene for you. But is it? Why is it that people of other races, i.e. non-whites, are not getting into metal as much? Because if you could ask the same in the Western world, you could switch it and say R&B. But is there as much? Because I wonder if things like white power groups, did that put people off? Because they are a subculture of the metal genres, whether we want them or not. But they play like hardcore, white power, punk, whatever you want to call it. But if you see it in movies, they always play what we would class as white power, heavy metal, skinhead. Sorry, thrown in with that lot. But unfortunately, when you do see it in metal, if you didn't know that is not what we would class as metal, we don't indoctrinate those people within our society. They are completely off on their own. But because they're playing effectively a version of metal, people go, metal's racist because of that. But do we see in R&B, and you see something like the film Boys to the Hood and Boys in the Hood, and you see the guys in the low ride and that sort of thing, and you go, well, the Bloods and Crips and all that sort of thing, and you're like, but I don't want to get in that because they're racist, but they're not. It's again, it's perception. So is it perceived, and that's why people don't get into the music?
Go back to the question: is it exclusionary? And then let's ask the other question: do you lose any sleep because ethnic minorities are not well represented in bands in metal? I don't, because I don't believe in social engineering. Music is something that you like instinctively, and then you read up on it, and then you meet other like-minded people. You don't have to do that. You could be somebody who works as a stockbroker and just listens to extreme metal all the time and never talks about it with anyone. So I don't think we should ever be looking at this like we do in politics. We want all our public institutions to reflect the racial demographics of the country, and we start arguing about, only 7% of team leaders in the civil service at this grade are from black and ethnic minority backgrounds. We shouldn't be imposing that onto art, onto music. Absolutely not. But what is the argument for the subconscious racism? Because subconscious racism, as I said again, the way it's defined, there's no really malicious intent behind that. It's an educational thing. We need to be aware of.
For me, it was a case of, we talk about in this society now, it's about inclusionary, everything being inclusive. People need to feel that they're welcome in it. And it just got me thinking, when I was just going through my album collection and just listening to bands and stuff, I'm like, it's very white. And I just thought, well, why? And I was like, so why isn't there's a lot of, like, if you look in the Western market or the Western world, it's not like it's 90% white people. It's a really weird
rap and hip hop are the dominant genres.
But why haven't? And is that because we talk about, you had that thing, nature versus nurture? So if you're in your nature, if you've been brought up with that music going on. So I was brought up with pop music and stuff in the house, and then but my dad listened to classic gold, and so all we had was things like the Hollies and Beatles and stuff like that. So I was always then brought up on guitar-based music, so I got into that. I never really listened to anything from the R&B catalogue, so but I did listen to chart music when I was much younger, before I got into rock and metal. So I did listen to whatever was in the top 10 and stuff like that. And I eventually then moved off into rock and got Def Leppard, and I went from Def Leppard, and the next album after Def Leppard was Cannibal Corpse. It's quite an extreme jump. I don't know why I did that. It's like, I'm into heavy metal now, let's go get that entrails ripped from up. No, so it was quite an extreme change up for me, but I just didn't I was just trying. I don't know why
You
it's
just
so
asking why,
separated.
weren't you? You weren't.
And it
your
was.
conscience
Is it
wasn't-
subconsciously? Is there a subconscious racism, or do people perceive the genre as racist, and that's why they wouldn't get into
I
it?
think it's just how it is, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I don't know.
Again, the quite my
That's
answer.
not an answer, though, is it?
No, no.
But it's an answer where
No,
we don't know the reason.
I don't think there's, you know, this sort of fear of. You mentioned like a very, very small subgenre
Yeah.
that express white power through the music.
NSBM,
yeah,
National
and
Socialist
the
Black Metal.
what do you say that sort of punk scene?
Yeah.
I don't think that puts off people from certain demographics from getting into rock and metal. That's just a very, very small thing. It's just
But it does put a perception within certain demographics that they might think that it is a racist.
what that covers the whole spectrum of
If
rock
they
and
don't
metal.
know rock and metal.
Oh,
Yeah, do you know what? You've got a point. Because let's be honest, if we're talking, take these English flavour of rap, grime. Straight away, I'm not going to listen to that because I can't identify that lifestyle of, you know, in South London, knife crime, defending your territory. That's not me.
Yeah.
I would feel like a fraud listening to that and trying
I
to
see
get
what you
into
mean,
it. Because of the themes and because of the aesthetic, I can see that it's an edgy genre of music. And there are actually some really interesting bass loops in that music. You know, it's quite dissonant and musically it's not actually as primitive as you think, but I'm never going to listen to that because that's not my life. There's no escapism in listening to a diss track, you know, talking about some black dude in fucking Woolwich talking about someone in the neighbouring borough who's going to knife. Why am I going to listen to that? I would feel like a fraud. People, rightly so, would lampoon me and just say, "What are you doing?" So maybe let's use the example of, you know, a black person. When they look at extreme metal, for example, and they see these white men just doing these demonic noises and the guitars thrashing away and the drums at 260 BPM. Yeah, maybe they're thinking what I am about grime. They're like, "Fucking hell, is this what white people do to vent their anger?" So
It could just be purely demographical areas. As we said, we've got, so within the African continent, there's some great grindcore bands and slam bands in there. I've seen a few videos from them; they're amazing. But then, if you were to go like you're a Caucasian white band, and you were to try and launch yourself in Japan, you're going to be completely outnumbered because it's the demographic of location. So, is it just? But I guess it's because we would class our country as a multi-national, multi-faith, whatever you want to say, country. So we have a really good split demographic, but we still seem to be.
well, I mean, Britain is it 83% white? Let's not forget that. So when we say we're a multicultural country, we are the majority, like us three, from a racial point of view, are white Europeans or of Celtic and
We
Germanic.
need someone from another race on the channel to give a viewpoint, I think, on this. 'Cause
But
we're coming from. There's three people coming from a one Pacific view of. There's no.
which we don't need to feel guilty about.
I
Let's
don't.
point out.
I don't think there's a problem in the sense of that. It is what it is, as long as people don't feel that they're being excluded.
yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know. No one's
to
ever
exclude
had-
anyone.
No, but I
At the
don't.
same time, we're not political activists who are determined to increase representation of BAME people in heavy metal. That is just absurd.
And it's the same when you go to gigs. It's if you go to a rock and metal gig, it's a predominantly like 99% crowd of white people in there. So it is a very much an organic. That is the
And that's
target.
what I've grown up with as well.
But I just don't understand. But I don't know if you went to an R&B gig, would it be?
I probably would feel a bit out of place.
Yeah.
If I went to a gig and only 2% of people there were white, I would be looking around thinking, do I belong here?
Yeah, that's it.
So maybe that is what...
But would that make you racist because you don't feel comfortable in that environment versus
Does it
them
make
being
you
racist? So is it the person that doesn't feel comfortable going into an environment? So
You mean subconsciously?
subconsciously.
racist,
So let's say
Yeah.
if I felt uncomfortable, let's say I went to Brixton Academy and there was an R&B gig going on there, and I was like, I really like the music, but I didn't feel going there would be comfortable because there's too many black people going there and I'd feel out of place. Am I the racist at that
No,
point?
not at all.
It's a question.
Let me give you an example. Right?
So-
let's say that your job is
So I
to
don't-
fit alarms right,
yeah.
for a living, and you have to do one at a mosque on a Friday, and the Friday prayers are going on. Are you going to feel a bit out of place while you well, you're actually
But it's the
installing this
I
alarm
guess
and
it's
they're all prostrating themselves on the floor.
But the question is, it's
of course you fucking are.
it's the reasons why you'd feel out of place. If you feel out of place because you don't feel you belong in that in society or in that.
Well, you don't, because you're not a Muslim. So why would you think that you belong there?
Well, not in a mosque during prayer time, no.
No.
Because
But you could be in there installing
as long as you've had a conversation to do electrical work, I guess. Yeah. I don't know why we're on this right now.
No, but my point is, like, what the word racism is so loaded now.
It is.
You know, it's like there's no difference between Hitlerian racism and subconscious racism, and that is utterly absurd that people are unable to make that distinction. This is a good question, though. Subconsciously, depends what the definition of it is. I think we've come up with some good examples. I would feel uncomfortable, to use that example, if I went to an R&B show and there were 2,000 people there and I was one of 10 people that are white. I would naturally feel like I'm out of place. And that's surely what ethnic minorities feel in metal.
And the pure question would be is why? So do you feel out of place because you feel that you would be jumping on a
cultural appropriation.
And if that's the case, then that's a fair. Then you're being then subconsciously then that environment is being subconsciously racist to you because they're making you feel that way. They're making you feel that they're.
I mean, I'd rather not blame anyone.
No, but that could be it. But if you don't feel that you should be there because safety or you don't feel like people might pick on you, then you're making assumptions about how they're going to treat you, which then makes you subconsciously racist at that point. So I think it's interesting about the why of why something. But there's definitely something there, but I just don't know what it is.
Do we agree the answer is no, though?
I think there is no. I don't think there is.
I mean, it's the origins. I mean, we've given examples of R&B and we've got rock and metal on the screen here. I mean, it's just.
It could be in any genre.
But it's the origins of that genre, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you've given some good examples, Kirk, about feeling uncomfortable at a show and vice versa. But how do you change that, or do we need to change it?
No, we don't need
We don't need to change it because people have got their own.
No.
Why does art need to be democratized?
I think as long as people we're always trying to be inclusive in the sense that no one is targeted. And with the whole elements of the whole pronoun issues, they, them, with the transgender issues, with everything like that we're as a society we're much more open to trying to be inclusive for everyone. So from a race point of view, which is something that everyone's been trying to be inclusive anyway, I think generally within all music we should be. There are always going to be extremists on every area that will say this is mine, you can't have it, this is not for you. And we could say the origins. You could say the R&B comes from the blues. But it's weirdly, so does rock. So all of it goes back to the early blues. R&B went in one way, rock and metal went the other way, and we just took it heavier and industrial.
Well, that's the basis of AC/DC's Let There Be Rock, isn't it?
I mean, let me give you an example, right? And I was watching, I can't remember, Ted Geier is called, he was on the Rick Beato show, and he was saying, before the Delta blues, you know, this idea of bending strings on a guitar, Western music was very theoretical. This is how you tune your instrument. It never occurred to anyone to do a pitch bend on a stringed instrument. So even that technique alone, at the early 20th century, that comes out of the Delta blues scene, look at the impact that's had on rock guitar. Jazz, you know, these weird time signatures, polyrhythms. It's amazing, isn't it? The influence, even now, the whitest music around probably is progressive metal, isn't it? How much of that has a debt to jazz and Delta blues and all these great rock and roll, these genres which were predominantly black, and we should always be honouring that and be grateful. Yes, we've reprocessed it and given it a new identity, and it's unrecognisable from its origins. But yeah, I mean we are aware of the irony.
If you look at the thing is, if you went down the prog metal route, you could literally say, well, a lot of prog metal owes its roots to classical music.
Yeah.
Because of the way. I mean, I actually listen to a lot of classic FM in the van because I find it really interesting the structure of the music. You can start to suddenly hear that as if it was
very
a metal band, very sophisticated playing. But then you add the blues into it, and it changes a whole load of elements. So, anyway, very interesting discussion topic. Now, let us know what you think in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and we'll see you on another video sometime very soon. Take care.